Welcome to Digital Literacy, a guide to using technology in journalism. This presentation is brought to you by the Henry W. Grady College of Journalism and Mass Communication at the University of Georgia. All right, so we're going to go ahead and talk about building a quick audio slideshow in Adobe's Premiere. Premiere is the video editing software, but we're going to try using it for some audio slideshows. So what I've already done is I've gone ahead and I've edited my images, and I've brought, looks like about 17 of them together into one folder here. And I also have my edited audio file. Now you can edit audio right in Premiere if you want, but I've decided just to make it a little bit easier, and I've already got that done as a WAV file. Now you don't have to have everything in one folder. Adobe Premiere will allow you to sort of draw from lots of different places if you want. But this was just going to be a little bit easier. So when I go ahead and launch Premiere, I'm going to get this view here, this welcome here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and click on New Project. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give it a name. And since we like that date code and our initials, and I'm going to call this Iron Horse, because that's what it is. Now it gives me some options for where I want to save this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and click Browse, and I'm going to go to my desktop and create a new folder, 150202 Iron Horse. So that's going to create everything in one place there and keep it all together. So I'm going to go ahead and click Choose. I'm not going to worry about any of this information down here for now. There's nothing in there that I need to worry about. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check a couple of things. I'm going to go up under Premiere and I'm going to come to Preferences, General. The default in Adobe Premiere Pro is for this here, default scale to frame size, to be unchecked. And before you do anything else, you have to make sure that that is checked. Now what this will do is when I bring in a bunch of images for an audio slideshow, when I bring those images over to the timeline in a little bit here, this will automatically scale them to fit on my timeline. If I don't do that, they're going to end up at all kinds of crazy different sizes. So I've got to make sure that that default scale to frame size is checked. That is critical. And it's one of the first things you have to do. You have to do it before you create a sequence and before you import any images. So now I've got four basic windows here. Upper left, this here is what we call our source monitor. Anything that we click on down here in our project area, this is where all of our media files are going to be. If we check something down here, click something down here, it pops up here. Upper right hand corner, this is our program monitor, and this is tied to where we are on the timeline. Now these are all blank right now because we haven't actually created anything. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and import my media. So I'm going to go to File and come down, or I could just hit Command I, and then I'm going to go to my desktop, and I have that other folder, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to select all of this and import it. And that's going to chug along for a few seconds, and then you're going to see over here I have all of these images of the Iron Horse out in Greene County there. So after I click on that audio file there, you'll see it comes up here, and this has a little scrubber on it, this little yellow thing here, and I can sort of drag it through in lots of different directions there, just like that. The other thing that I can do is I can use my J, K, and L command. So L, remember, plays.
So this is the story of a horse, but not just any.
K will stop it, and J will play it backwards. Now, there's not a whole lot that I actually need to do with this because I have already pretty much edited the audio, so it's all set. So I can come up here to File and go to New, Sequence, and that's going to give me a bunch of presets. We're not going to worry about that. I am going to go to Settings here, and the editing mode I'm going to set to Custom. And what this is going to do is allow me to have some control. So I want a nice big file. So I'm going to do our standard high definition, which is 1920 by 1080. That's the standard high def field there. And the rest of this, I'm just going to leave this all the same. Aspect ratio, fields, display format, 30 frames per second, all of these things here, I'm going to leave that all alone. And then I'm just going to go ahead and rename it. So this, once again, our date code, Iron Horse, and I usually just put an SEQ at the end of it for sequence, and then I'm going to click OK. Now that gives me information down here. So now I have a video track, I have some audio tracks that are in here, and again, this is going to operate the same way as our video file. So what I can do is I can just grab this from here. Now I could set in point and out point up here, but I don't need to do that for this, and bring it right over here, and I put it where my cursor there is, where the scrubber is, and now I've got audio on my timeline, which is great. But what I want to do now is I want to start adding images. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to listen for a second here and see what we talk about first.
So this is the story of a horse, but not just any horse. It's a giant iron horse. It stands 12 feet tall, weighs about 3 tons.
Okay, so we're talking about the iron horse, the legendary iron horse that's out in Greene County. So I want a nice image that sort of gives me this beginning feel. So if I double click on my first image here, there we have it. There's the iron horse. So I'm going to come back over here to the beginning. And one of the things you'll notice is that the length of the clip is 5 seconds. Premiere Pro by default sets everything at 5 seconds. It's one of the things that you can deal with in the preferences if you want to make them longer or shorter. It doesn't actually make any difference because we can stretch or squeeze them for whatever time we want. So I'm going to take this image, since this is my starting image, I'm just going to drag it down here onto the video 1 timeline, and you'll see it there. Now I'm going to play my audio and figure out where I want my second image to appear.
So this is the story of a horse. But not just any horse. It's a giant iron horse.
Is that where I want it? I think probably it is pretty close. I can zoom in on this by dragging this left or right, and so I can see it a little bit larger. And I'm going to come back here and I'm going to play it again and figure out exactly where I want that clip to end.
It's a giant iron horse. It stands 12 feet tall.
I think I want it just before it stands 12 feet tall. So I'll back up. That's about the right point, and remember, that's J for backwards, K for stop, L for forwards, and then I can use the arrow keys to go back 1 frame at a time if I want. And now what I'm going to do, that's where I want it, I'm going to come over here, and when I come to the end of this clip, all right, see how I've got that arrow pointing back in? I'm going to click and drag, and it'll snap to right there, and that gives me where that image is. Now the next image, let's come in a little bit closer and say, let's do this one. And once again, I can just take this and I can drag it down and put it on there, and you can see that we will hop from one image to the next.
It stands 12 feet tall, weighs about 3 tons, and for more than 5 decades it sat in a field facing away from the University of Georgia.
Okay, so if I come back in and I listen, let's figure out where I want this image to end.
Weighs about 3 tons, and for more than 5 decades.
So let's see.
It's 12 feet tall, weighs about 3 tons.
That's where I want this one to end. So I can come back down here and once again come to the end, and you can see that the arrow is pointed back into the clip. Click, drag. This is the trim tool. It just lets me move that back in there. And now that next comment is about looking away from the university. So let me grab this one here. All right, and again, click, drag, drop it down here, and let's see how this looks.
It's about 3 tons, and for more than 5 decades it sat in a field facing away from the university.
Now, that's not actually the right way to do this, because I want this first image to be here a little bit longer. So I can come in to my tools that sit here between my project stuff and my timeline, and I can get the rolling edit tool, and I'm going to click on that. I had been clicked on the arrow up here, or the selection tool. Come in here, grab this. Now what I can do is I can come over this edit point, click and drag, and I can move it to where I want it to be. So let's see.
5 decades it sat in a field.
I think I want it there. So let me come in and move this over again until I get to there. Now let's take a look.
And for more than 5 decades it sat in a field facing away from the University of Georgia.
And I want this one to end out here, so I'm going to go back to the selection tool, grab that, and stretch it out. Now what I can do is I can keep adding images as I go along here. And again, I can zoom out, or I can scroll along, whichever it is that's going to make my life a little bit easier. So I'm going to pause this for a second here, and I'm going to go ahead and add a bunch more images, and then we'll get to the export and render function. Okay, I have gone ahead and I've added in the rest of my images here, and this is just a real quick sort of simple edit. Now, one of the things you may notice is that when it's paused like this, the image quality is really good, but when I play it, you'll notice that the image quality drops.
And by the evening, there were hundreds of students.
And the reason for that is this pull down right here. One of the things that Premiere Pro will allow us to do is to play things at a lower resolution, and that just allows your machine to run a little bit faster. If you wanted to, you can go ahead and you could plug that back up to full, and you'll see that it plays. at full resolution, but it can sort of overtax your video processor, particularly if you've got a lot of large video files or a lot of photos in here. So you can drop it to half. If you're on a really weak machine that doesn't have a strong separate graphics processing unit like a MacBook Air, you may want to drop it all the way down to a quarter. It doesn't affect your end results at all. So I'm going to leave mine on half. Now, one of the other things that I can do is I can go ahead and I can put some transitions in here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the Effects tab here and go to Video Transitions and to Dissolve. And Cross Dissolve is going to be the standard one that I want. So I'm once again going to go ahead and zoom in here. And when I come back to the beginning, I don't necessarily want this to just begin. I want it to fade up a little bit. So I'm going to grab a Cross Dissolve here, and I'm going to put it at the beginning. And now if I play this, you'll see that I go from black and I'm going to fade up nicely.
So this is the story of a horse, but not just any horse. It's a giant.
Now, when I get to this next one, for this project, it kind of makes sense for them to be straight cuts, to move from one to the next.
Stands 12 feet.
But if I wanted to do a cross dissolve in there, once again, I could drag it, and this time I would drop it on top of the edit. And now what I would see is that it's going to fade from one to the next.
Horse. It stands 12 feet tall, weighs about 3 tons.
And of course, at the end, I would probably want this to fade out as well. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a cross dissolve and put it on there. Now, if I was going to spend some more time on this, I'd go ahead and I'd add some graphics, maybe some lower third graphics to identify the location, some opening title credits or some closing title credits, something like that. But I'm not going to worry about that. Now, the last thing I want to do is export and render this. Now, I do have a problem because if you look right here, this is telling me that I have an endpoint on here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit Option I, and that's going to clear that out. And the reason I want to do that is if I tried to export this, I'd only export the tail end of that. So I'm going to go up under File, come down to Export, and go to Media, or just Command M would allow me to do this. And I'm going to make sure that some settings here are what I want. I want my format to be H.264. That's the video codec we're going to use. The preset, this is for a couple of different things. We're just going to leave that as Match Source, so that's fine. The output name, I'm going to change this, and I'm going to change the location of it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take Sequence off the end, and I'm going to put Edit on it, and I'm going to send it to my desktop so that I know exactly where it is. Click Replace because I had already done this once before. And then the rest of the stuff, I'm going to go ahead and leave this alone. Now I can go ahead and click Export, and once again, I've got one there. This is going to go ahead and just churn through here. Depending upon the length of your piece, this could take a long time, might go pretty quick. It's also going to depend upon how powerful the processor in your machine is. So I'm going to let this cook for a few seconds here. All right, so this is just about done. A couple of seconds left on this. Now I'm working on a fairly robust 27-inch iMac here with a pretty powerful graphics card in it, and that took probably 2.5 to 3 minutes to finish up there. A couple of key things to remember on this. The first thing you have to do as soon as you launch Premiere Pro is go up under Premiere Pro, Preferences, General, and make absolutely sure that default scale to frame size is checked. If you don't do that, you're going to have to go in and manually adjust a lot of the images, and that's going to drive you insane. So once you've got that done, go ahead, click OK. Then you can go ahead and start a new sequence, and my recommendation is start it as a 1920 by 1080 file. That'll give you a nice file size there. Then import your images. You can import your images and audio first or create the sequence first. It doesn't make any difference. Push in your audio and then go ahead and start matching up your images to fit with your audio. So give it a try. It's a different sort of a system than using SoundSlides, which is what we've done in the past. And SoundSlides is a little bit simpler, but this gives you a higher level of control. And again, you can control all of your audio more directly right here. This presentation has been brought to you by the Henry W. Grady College of Journalism and Mass Communication at the University of Georgia. For more videos in this series, visit us online at visualjournalism.info/diglit.